Hello, and welcome back to the Vertical Stride, the podcast where we break down the principles of training for the beginner runner all the way to the professional athlete. I'm your host, Jack Wren, and I believe that while paces, goals, and races differ, the principles that will bring us all success are the same for everybody. Our first guest needs no introduction. Those of you listening at home are going to have a huge sigh of relief hearing the sweet, dulcet tones of Brian Newman gracing your audio waves again. Welcome back, Brian. How are you?
Thanks so much. I'm doing really wonderfully. Thanks for having me back on.
Of course, it's always a pleasure. And then to really highlight our episode topic today, we're going to be talking about navigating the running store. We're bringing on an old teammate of ours, an old friend of ours, even an old roommate of mine. So we've spent as much time as anyone would maybe want to spend with me. We have Travis Moe, who spent several years on the club team with us at school while also working at the local running store. Is going to be a great voice of expertise. Welcome, Travis.
Thanks, Jack. Hey, everyone.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
Awesome.
Awesome. Saving your words for hopefully talking about the running store. But,
Absolutely.
well, so we will just jump right in. So we talked a lot about our training. We talked last week about race day. And we've talked about how our running and our training and those principles support our performance and our ability to continue running. But a lot of this starts even earlier than that. We have to get the gear. We have to set ourselves up for success. And so, one of the best places for us to do that is at the running store. And so, I'm going to go to Travis first because he has, spent years and years working at the running store, has a lot of expertise here. Travis, kind of walk us through that introductory, that first time coming into the running store. What do you see out of customers? And then we'll ask Brian later what a customer, kind of experiences on their end.
Yes. So the very first time you enter the running store, I know it can sometimes be pretty overwhelming. I think one of the first things that we would do is we always made sure we greeted the customer, just making sure okay, they're welcome here. It's fine. What are you interested in? What do you need help with? And really, if they're interested in doing the gait analysis and getting a shoe fitting, the first thing that we'll do is really ask about their history. So are they facing any injuries right now? What are their current shoes? How old are your shoes? Do you plan on having any sort of change in training plans or anything like that? And really, that's going to guide a lot of the rest of the process. So, for example, some of the things that we're going to be looking into is, if you have any Achilles issues, maybe we would lean towards a shoe with less of a drop. And then same thing with if you have knee issues or, pain on your lateral side or on the medial side, maybe that's going to be an indicator for more supportive shoes or more neutral shoes. So a lot of that history is going to be super important at the very start. And
yeah. So I just, I don't want to intimidate anyone in our audience that maybe doesn't speak in quite those medical terms. When you say lateral and medial side, what are maybe common language areas that you're talking about there?
Yeah, so lateral side is pretty much your outer side, and your medial side is your inner side. And for that, really when it comes down to if you're having pain in your medial side, there's a good chance that maybe you're going to want something that's a bit more supportive. Versus if you're having pain that's on the lateral side, there's a chance that maybe we would want to, be more conscious of that and lean towards a more neutral shoe. I mean, these aren't tried and true methods necessarily, but it's something that might guide us as we're going through the shoe fitting process as well. And that's just one thing that we look at the very start as well.
Cool. So I'm going to jump to Brian now, who's kind of our experienced customer. So he has spent his time. We've heard quite a bit about his journey. So I want Brian to travel back to when he was a new runner. Can you remember that first experience in a running store, Brian? And how does it sound compared to what Travis was describing?
Yeah, so I'm going to take you guys back even further. So I grew up in rural South Carolina, and there really was not a running store near where I lived. There were sort of generic shoe stores, but they were not very helpful in terms of running shoes. So, when I first started out, I got my running shoes by just looking at running brands like Nike and Asics, figuring out what is the cheapest possible way I can get a running shoe. And I came up with a strategy that I thought was pretty impressive at the time, which was I found a local, Kohl's every Black Friday sold this one pair of running shoes for $35. And so I would just buy 12 pairs of that and wear it for the rest of the year. A very, very frugal method. I did that for the next 10 years. The problem was it was not a very effective method. I was very injury prone for the first 10 years of my career. And I think the shoes, which were incredibly heavy and clunky, cheap material, played a big role in why I was so injury prone. So,
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to interrupt really quick. What were some of those injuries? And then Travis, I want you to chime in if you feel like some of those injuries are shoe related or potentially shoe related.
I had a lot of Achilles issues. It sort of felt like every year my Achilles would flare up for at least a couple of weeks. And then I didn't have any stress fractures, but just a lot of kind of tendon issues. Yeah, like knee pain, ankle pain.
Yeah. Travis, what do you think?
I think, well, first of all, the knee pain was one of my very first indicators for when do I need a new pair of shoes. I think in high school, whenever my knees started bothering me, I'm like, Mom, I really need to go buy a new pair of shoes. I think probably for Achilles could just be overused, or maybe you're running too much, or running too hard, or ramping up a little aggressively. But it's something that we would have definitely paid attention to, and we would have thought about. We're talking about some technical terms maybe, but the drop of the shoe. So really, the difference in toe height versus heel height is the heel. How much higher is the heel? And so a higher heel difference from your toe to your heel, that is going to put less stress on your calves and therefore your Achilles as well, versus a lower drop shoe, or maybe a shoe that's entirely flat with a 0 millimeter drop. That one would put more stress on your calves and your Achilles.
And
Yeah.
so all this would have been really helpful information for 17-year-old Brian to know. Like I said, my only criteria was what is the cheapest possible way to get shoes. But finally, after years of injury, I went to our local running store in Charlottesville, Ragged Mountain running and walking store, which is phenomenal. The staff there were really great. I kind of explained my injury history and just sort of described what I was hoping for in a shoe. And they right away, suggested a couple of options, tried them all on, tested them out, found a shoe that I loved, and that has been my go-to shoe for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Awesome. So I just, for potentially fun moment here, is there any chance that Travis was working that day?
So not that day, but he did. I stopped in once or twice before then, and he was working there. He helped me get some spikes for a pair of track shoes at one point.
Okay. Nice.
Nice.
Well, so, this maybe so far has seemed a little scary to a beginning runner. We've got off on the foot of like, hey, if we're experiencing pain, right? Hopefully we're not experiencing pain. Let's just say we're getting started. We know that we want to start running, but we haven't started running yet. Travis, what would you suggest, they come prepared with, in terms of knowledge or information about what they're going to do versus like equipment, stuff that's going to help make your job getting them into the right shoe easier?
Yeah. So I think the first time you come in, it's really good. Like I said, we're going to want to gather the history. So if you're prepared for that, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Are you, starting on a couch to 5K plan, or, are you trying to run your first marathon, or are you, already an elite runner? That's going to help us understand, like, how are we going to, approach the situation to begin with. So I think, yeah, again, being prepared for that. I'd recommend bringing your current pair of shoes that you're currently exercising in, whether or not it's, the $35 pair of shoes that you bought from Kohl's, or maybe from another running shop. It doesn't really matter. It's definitely worth us seeing that, because we're going to want to watch you walk and run in that pair of shoes. And also bring a pair of socks, that you're actually running in, because you should be conscious of the thickness of the socks. That's going to affect how the shoe feels, how it fits. And so ideally we get something that's exactly what you're normally running in. And I know sometimes it's a bit daunting paying a lot of money for some shoes, I would be prepared to spend $130 to $160 for a pair of shoes. But linking back to maybe what Brian was saying too, I once had a customer tell me after he bought 6 pairs of the same shoe that was like $160 shoes, he said, this is much cheaper than the medical bills I've been having to pay without having these shoes, which have really helped me.
Yeah, that's something that I firmly believe in and tell our high school athletes and, other adults that I'm encouraging is also particularly with adults, kind of similar to what Brian was describing earlier. They want to find the shoe cheaply. They want to find a cost-effective way to do it. And I like to call it an investment in yourself and in your health. And, you're going to save yourself a lot of aches and pains. And running's going to become a lot more enjoyable if you have comfortable shoes that will kind of take care of you. Brian, so you said it was a while before you made it to a running store the first time. How similar does what Travis just described sound to what your experience was when you first went to Ragged?
Yeah, I think very similar. So I will admit, first time you go in, you see this, this wall of every possible shoe imaginable, and it is a little intimidating. So I completely, understand that feeling. But the staff there are really incredible. I'm sure this is true at many running stores across the country. The staff there are incredible. They're very knowledgeable, and most importantly, they really want to help. So, they asked me questions about my goals, about my history, what I was hoping for in a shoe. And they gave me several options, and they spent some time with me. So, if the first one or two options didn't work, didn't feel right, they went back and tried something else. They sort of listened to my feedback, made some adjustments. Okay, this shoe is maybe a little too wobbly. Let's try something else. And again, I think any good running store, you're going to get that level of attention and care.
Yeah. So we heard, and we'll let Travis be the judge, either technical or untechnical term of wobbly, Travis. What does that kind of tell you? Do you pretty much you'll listen to anything that they say of hey, this isn't comfortable, and it's all right, now it's time to keep working with you, find something that's better?
Maybe let me first start with, you look at that wall of shoes. I think if you go with, you go to a place like REI, you go to Dick's, a lot of times you just go there and you say, I want the one that looks the coolest, or this one looks comfy. Can I go try it? Do you have my size? A lot of people would enter Ragged Mountain like that as well. Mm-hmm. And usually that's when we ask, well, do you want a shoe fitting? Do you want a gait analysis? And they've never even heard of what that is. And we talk them through it, and they say, oh yeah, let's try it. And so maybe, getting into that process, the way we would do it first is, after we ask their history, we would watch them walk and run in their existing shoes. Also get a feel for, are they neutral shoes? Are they supportive shoes? So there we're getting into the wobbly or stability side of things. And then from there, we would also watch them walk and run in their barefoot. Mm-hmm. That gives us a bit of feeling of, do they have a bit of pronation? Is their arch dropping as they're walking or running? Is it different when they're walking and running as well? And what is their primary movement? Are they going to use it as a walking shoe or primarily a running shoe? And then, like Brian said, we're going to try on a lot of different shoes. First, we're going to start off in a brand new neutral pair of running shoes, see how those feel. And if we are seeing excessive pronation, then there's frequently we'll also try more supportive shoes as well, especially if the history is leaning towards something like that where you would potentially benefit from a more stable set of shoes.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question there, because my first job was also working at a running store, and we would do the gait analysis and, let people try on shoes. We would watch them walk. We jumped straight to watching them walk barefoot. We kind of wanted to see what their foot was naturally going to do. And I maybe misunderstood you. Would you all, even if you watched them have some overpronation in their current shoes and barefoot, would you still try them in a neutral shoe just to see what that looked like?
Yes. And part of that is because if you look at, if you take an old pair of shoes that, 400, 500 plus miles on it, even if they're neutral, there's a good chance, I'm a neutral runner for the most part. You'll see quite a bit of pronation in my broken down Nike Pegasuses. And versus a new pair of Nike Pegasus, I'm going to look neutral in. So that's something where like, we'll look at that as well and say, let's start with the bare bones neutral shoe. And then, then we'll build up in stability if we think we need it.
Okay. And so you're throwing out this word stability, and I happen to know that that goes in conjunction with overpronation,
Hmm.
right? Describe what overpronation is. You mentioned the arch dropping, but what are some other things that you're looking for when you watch them walk or run that tell you that someone overpronates?
Maybe it's something as a someone who worked at a running store is notices a bit more, but you probably walk behind someone and you just completely see their feet hanging over the edge of their shoes. And I can't get that out of my head, but it's something that we often look for. Of course, we're usually not seeing anything quite that excessive,
Hmm.
but we'll see their ankles kind of folding over, their ankles bending, like facing inward. Really, those are the things that we're really looking for. And sometimes people are more prone to pronation as well, like based on like are your feet naturally facing forward like this, or are they kind of angled outward? Are they more angled inward? That might be a bit of an indicator as well for whether or not they are more neutral or if they're need more stability.
Yeah, and we would always, couple that conversation with, we were looking for the arch flattening and collapsing in. We would specifically look for like the ankle kind of rotating or turning in, and then really describing and emphasizing to the customer that that is like this whole chain reaction all the way up your leg, right? That if your ankle rolls in, your ankle is now out of line, which is going to mess with your knee, which is going to mess with your hip, right? And so you both mentioned kind of knee being the first thing to tell you that it's time for shoes. That's another indicator that, all right, hey, maybe you're still in that beginning running phase. You found the cheap pair of shoes and you've been trying to run, but you're having a lot of knee pain or you're having some hip pain or ankle pain. That could be something that is contributing to it. And just getting someone with a practiced eye to look at it, I think it can be a big help. Brian, do you overpronate? Are you in a stability shoe? Where do you fall in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm fairly neutral. I mean, no one is, perfect. But yeah, I'll be honest. Again, as a sample size of one, as someone who has never worked at a running store and has had to help, hundreds of other people, I personally don't worry too much about that. So again, preface this by, I'm approaching this from, what works best for me based on the kind of the literature and the science that's out there. You know, to build on what Travis is saying, certainly, if you're experiencing problems, if you're pronating or your arches are collapsing or things that are causing genuine issues that are affecting your form, affecting your health, you absolutely need to get those addressed. And the staff at a running store is sort of first line of defense for helping you get there. I think for me personally, I'm not too worried about pronation patterns. Um, a lot of recent literature suggests that one of the primary factors, at least in preventing injuries, is comfort, is how do the shoes feel? I know that is not necessarily a super scientific term, but when you wear a pair of shoes, you walk in it, you run in it, does it feel natural after you go for a couple of runs in it? Um, there have been, again, some recent studies that looked at, um, you know, applying all these different shoes to sort of correct pronation, correct, arches and all of that. And these studies found that there wasn't a whole lot of an impact on injury prevention, and that they suggested that what makes the biggest difference is finding the shoe that feels right for you. Now,
Hmm.
caveat is chances are what feels right for you is naturally going to correct some of the issues. If you're severely overpronating, the shoe that feels right is probably going to correct a little bit of that naturally. But I think something to kind of keep in mind is that what feels right is often a really good kind of indication that it could be right for you.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, so this is Brian's third episode, and he's touching on it here. He touched on it in types of workouts and in slow to go fast. Kind of knowing that feel of your own body is really important feedback. You know, I think part of maybe what Brian is talking about is for a long time, running stores and people that would fit you for running shoes leaned very heavily towards let's put the stability there because everybody overpronates to some degree, and so let's protect the overpronation. And is that kind of what you're referencing a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'm not trying to suggest that we should throw all of this out. It is important. But not every single person out there needs to correct every single, imbalance. Sometimes, if it feels right and it fits right, it's going to work pretty effectively for you. Although
Yeah.
happy to, Travis disagrees, happy to duke it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it reminds me that, at the time when I was working in a store, we tended more neutral, right? So, like, if we felt like someone was borderline, like, it's like, oh, we could kind of go either way. We're going to start you in a neutral and see how it feels. Um, Travis, was that kind of the approach that you all took, or did you all lean more stability?
Well, we would increment the stability so slowly that we would kind of get a feel like we wouldn't just go from all right neutral to like the most supportive shoe. It would be very very incremental. And once we start seeing no longer that pronation, that's about when we'd stop. But I think this is where it's not just on what we see alone that's going to help guide the shoe. It's also the history side of things. So there was definitely plenty of people who came in with like very neutral shoes. They were very heavy pronators, but they had no issues and they weren't really changing their habits. And therefore, let's go ahead and keep them in a neutral shoe because they were healthy at that. And however, there were many times the people came in and maybe they were running in a very neutral shoe and weren't having any issues, but they would have said, I want to start running for marathon. I want to really start training for that. And that's when the injury risk gets a bit higher in those potentially less supportive shoes. So that's where we would maybe lean a bit more towards a bit of more of a supportive shoe, just because we know there's going to be a change in their activity level as well.
Yeah. I mean, and I think something else that goes along with that is, there's a lot of running stores that do the feet scanning,
Yeah.
which I think is actually really great. I think it's really informative. I remember when I had that done the first time, and the first time I had it done was after working at a running store. So I knew my stuff. I knew how to do a gait analysis. Like I knew what category of shoes I belonged in, and I still felt like I learned things. But that is kind of a static measurement. You're standing still, and it's just getting the shape of your feet. And there's good, strong correlation between what you see when someone's just standing there and in the natural structure of their feet and their body. There's good correlation to what's going to happen when they run, but it's not perfect, right? And so, one of the things that I think about in particular as we're talking about stability is usually people with flatter feet were more prone to pronation, right? They would tend to overpronate a little more because that arch was already collapsed, but not everyone was going to end up, you know, needing that stability shoe. And I think part of what happens there is the mechanics change a little bit when you start moving, when you start running, compared to when you're just, standing still. And so, another place that kind of that feel and comfort test makes a difference.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think sometimes, we have the sense that, our feet, our legs are sort of this passive thing where, okay, there's this issue, so we're going to correct it in this way, and it's going to fix everything. It's all a very active process, like uh, all sorts of muscles and tendons and everything kind of moving all at once. And yeah, so it's a very sort of active process. And our legs also adapt to the different stimuli that we give them, so we're going to use slightly different muscles in different shoes that we're wearing or different surfaces that we're running on, so it's a very active dynamic process.
Yeah. Well, so we've focused a lot on the shoe so far. Okay. And I think what's really nice is, Travis worked at a store called Ragged Mountain Running Shop. They are an example of a fantastic store. I would recommend them 10 times out of 10 to anyone that's in Charlottesville that's looking to get into walking or running. Even if you're just walking, I would still go get a good pair of shoes, and they'll be able to help you find an appropriate shoe for that. Something that is a little less fortunate is not everyone has access to a good running store. And, I have seen what some of that looks like. People have experienced it. And I'm going to ask Travis first. If you were in a new location and you were getting a friend or a family member into running and you wanted to take them to a running store, what are some things that you might see or hear at a running store that would be a red flag to you?
So these are going to be actually based on experience that I've actually witnessed as well in the past. So I think a classic example is pushing running insoles, running inserts. A lot of times they'll say, "All right, here's a great shoe. Here's an insert to go with it. The insert's going to make it feel more cushioned or make it be a bit more stable." When in reality, for us, at least the philosophy at Ragged was, if we can get the support that we need out of the shoe, then why are we going to add an insert? And I think for us, an insert really only made sense if, let's say, you had work shoes or shoes that you wore a lot during your everyday life that you couldn't necessarily wear running shoes to work, and maybe an insert is a good way to add some support there. But we wouldn't put it in the running shoe usually as well.
Yeah, we tended towards the same approach that, 95 plus percent of clients, we could fix whatever needed to be fixed with the shoe alone and not necessarily needing the insert. Brian, have you had, places try and push the insert on you?
I definitely have, like I said, especially at some of the shoe stores. So the sort of generic, they sell all sorts of shoes because I think their mentality was, well, here, yeah, we're selling all sorts of shoes. You run, you're gonna need some support. So try this insert. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And so Travis, you all sold inserts as well. You all didn't, necessarily recommend them all the time for people putting them in their running shoes. But what are things about those inserts that make them a high quality product that are going to sound really impressive to people that don't realize or don't know I don't actually need this product?
Well, I mean, if you take one out of the box, you'll feel the arch, you'll feel it like you'll push on it. It actually is very stable and it makes a lot of sense. And once you put it in, it actually does feel pretty comfortable a lot of times.
Hmm.
But again, I think it just comes down to, if you can get that same comfort out of the same cost of a shoe, just neutral versus supportive, why spend an extra 30, 50, $60 on a pair of inserts that's not really adding as much?
Yeah. What brand of inserts did you all sell?
There was Power Step,
Okay.
Super Feet, I think. Yeah, so those are the two main ones.
Yeah, Superfeet was the main one that we sold. And so, correct me if I'm misremembering, but Superfeet, you're gonna hear the words like carbon,
Oh yeah.
which carbon is this huge buzzword. It has been for a long time. Everyone's like, oh yeah, carbon's the best. Carbon's great. Carbon's great. So you're going to hear like carbon fiber insert. You're going to hear something like it's going to lock your heel in place. It's going to help form a natural fat pad with the bottom of your heel. And so you're going to hear words like carbon. You're going to hear stability. You're going to hear support. You're going to hear natural. And it's like all these things that would kind of compel you to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds wonderful. But it's something that can be solved with the shoe, right? The shoe can solve that for you. And one of the things that we really want to get out of today is it doesn't feel good to go to a running store, spend a bunch of money, and feel like you got taken advantage of. And so we want to make sure that we share with you some of these things that, you know, might be pushed on you so that if you end up in a store like that, you kind of know what to listen for and hey, maybe that is not strictly necessary. Brian, what are some other things that you have felt like running stores have tried to kind of push at you or, that you've seen other people, have to kind of evade certain products?
Yeah, well, I think trying to sell you things that you don't need. So I think at a good running store, they're going to listen to you, listen to your history, listen to your goals, and then figure out shoes and products that fit that. So, um, you know, if you're running a mile race, you're going to need different shoes than if you're running a marathon race. But I've definitely seen people who are just starting out in running getting pushed toward a $300 pair of super shoes that have all this cushioning and everything. You don't need that as someone who is just trying to run 3 days a week. um so yeah, I think trying to upsell you to talk you into more and more expensive things And the other thing that I would say to be aware of is if you're feeling pressured to buy something, that's always a red flag for me. Um, my philosophy, and again, I'm a very frugal person. My philosophy is if I'm ever feeling any hesitation, I'm not going to buy it because you can almost always come back the next day or next week and buy it then. So it's always easier to kind of say no and come back. The other thing is I would check the return policy. A lot of reputable places will let you return things. Like at Ragged Mountain, for example, you can buy a pair of shoes, go for a run, and if you don't like the shoe, you can return it for store credit and buy something else. And I think a lot of reputable places have similar policies. So I would also be aware, if someone's really pressuring you to buy something right now, especially if there's no return policy on it, that's probably a good sign that you should think about walking away.
Yeah, Travis, do you remember exactly what Ragged's return policy was when you were working there?
I don't exactly remember, but I remember it was exchange for store credit.
Okay.
But I mean, you already go in with the idea that you're going to buy a pair of shoes, so I think the exchange for store credit is definitely more than fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was, you could definitely run it a few times. I remember taking the shoes back. So yeah, it's very fine.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at times I've taken shoes back to places when I've had 50 to 100 miles on them.
Yeah.
Like I've had a good couple weeks. Like I gave it a good faith effort. And, I think most running stores, if you take a shoe back and in good faith are going to exchange it with a different product of theirs, they don't mind if it's, hey, this shoe has 70 miles on it. And, I don't know if you ever got to experience this, Travis, but when I was at the store, when we got shoes like that, that was actually kind of nice because that meant that me working at the store was leaving with a free pair of shoes because the manufacturer wasn't going to take them back, but the manufacturer was going to replace them free of charge for us. And so, like the running stores, they want you there. They want to support you. They want to help you find that. And a good running store is going to have a pretty generous return policy because they know just how important it is to be in the right shoe.
And I'll also add, a good running store is also trying to build a relationship both with the community and with the customers. And so, for example, I've now been buying my shoes from Ragged Mountain for 5 or 6 years. They know me by name when I walk in. And, 2 years ago, I wanted to try out a different shoe that, on paper sounded really exciting and I thought could work well for me. Tried it out, took it for 2 runs, didn't like it, brought it back. They, exchanged it, no problem. And, they listened to me. They sort of tried to understand why the shoe didn't work for me and use that data to help point me towards something else that would work for me. So I think that also, a place that views you not as a not just as a source of money, but as a sort of relationship they can build, I think is a
Yeah.
great sign.
Travis, did you have a thought?
There was two other things I wanted to say when it comes to some more red flags.
Yeah.
And one of them was around the pushing to the ultra cushioned shoes. One thing's like, I think, for example, there's the Brooks Ghost, but rather than try the Brooks Ghost, they try the Glycerin. Or if, it's the Asics Cumulus, or Asics, Cumulus versus the Asics Nimbus, which is much more cushioned as well. That's an extra $40 upcharge. And sometimes they don't even put you in like the normal neutral shoe. They put you in the ultra cushioned one, which actually feels really, really nice, but it's something that you really don't need and actually might even feel less responsive when you're actually running. And
Yeah. Can you like de-level that a little bit for someone that maybe doesn't know what some of those shoes are or what it represents or the categories?
yeah, so the two examples that I gave were from the Brooks line and the Asics line. And there's the classic neutral shoe from each of those. There's the Brooks Ghost, which is the classic neutral shoe, and the Asics Cumulus, which is their classic one as well. However, each of those have a more cushioned neutral shoe as well. Some minor stability extra just because of the amount of cushioning, but in general, it's just extra cushioning. Feels really nice, more like a cloud. And that's what the Nimbus is, and that's what the Brooks Glycerin is as well. And, that's an extra $40, sometimes $50 for a pair of shoes. And like I said, when you're walking around the store or running around the store, it does feel pretty nice. But maybe when you're going to do your workouts, it feels less responsive. And it's something that I am a bit skeptical of when I go to a store, and I've seen people give my friends the more expensive, like
Mhm.
cushioned shoe when I say I don't really think they need that.
Yeah, I watched an example of this recently. I did watch, someone get fitted for a pair of shoes where they do need a little bit of stability posting to help with their natural mechanics. And the only shoe that was brought out for them was the Brooks Glycerin with the GTS guide rails. And so here's the really scary thing. That's a high quality shoe that is going to address the things that that person needed. But that person didn't get to try other options. They didn't get to try the light stability version or even just like the traditional stability shoe. So, for a little bit of context, um, the Glycerin GTS with guide rails is like a stability version of a neutral shoe. So, they add something to it to what is normally a high cushion neutral shoe, and then they say, hey, but we're going to put some stability in there. And they do it differently. It's designed differently than the traditional stability shoe, but it's by default because it's higher cushion and it has that stability. It's going to be more expensive than a lot of the other options that would have worked for this particular runner. Um, and so, yeah, I think only bringing out the high cushion versions of things that, is a 30, 40, sometimes $50 difference depending on the brand and what goes into making those shoes. You said you had another red flag?
Yeah, there was one more. I once had someone tell me that their goal was to sell a pair of socks with every shoe purchase. Like that was something that they were told to do. So they said always try to push for a pair of socks. Definitely not something we did at Ragged, but I definitely saw it from another shoe store employee at a
Yeah,
different place.
I think that's a super common one. And so I'm going to kind of maybe lead into an expected story from Brian, but I don't know if he actually has this. Have you been to a running store where they're like, hey, we want you to use like one of our try on pairs of socks to try on shoes?
So I actually have not. I
Okay.
apologize.
No, that's okay. Something that a lot of stores do is, and I get it. They don't know what you've been doing all day. They don't know if your feet are sweaty. You're trying on shoes and stuff. So they ask you to put on a clean pair of socks. And what they're going to do is they are going to pick their $18 pair of socks for you to try on with the shoes, and they're going to kind of get you moving. They're going to get you a little comfortable. And then they're going to be like, yeah, what do you think of the socks? Like, isn't it great that they don't have a seam so that you don't get blisters? Like, they're moisture wicking. Like, look at how thin they are so that they're not taking up space in the shoe. And then all of a sudden, it's like, one, you're getting distracted from the shoe, but two, like, now you're hearing all these great things about a sock. But let's face it, let's say you're running 5 days a week and you're gonna all of a sudden be running in an $18 sock every day of the week. That's another $100. Like that is a ton of money. That's a easy 20 bucks for them to push. And they have this requirement of, yeah, we need you to be in like one of these pairs of socks to try on shoes. Um, and so that's one to be wary of as well. And that happens to me all the time. I happen to know that the Costco socks that I have work just great for me. I don't get blisters. I don't have any issues. They do enough moisture wicking. Um, and so like I can like say no to that. But I have definitely felt at times when I was younger, like, oh, I kind of feel guilty not also getting this pair of socks that I watched them pull it out of the packaging for me to try on. And they'll do that in front of you too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say another red flag for me is in a healthy interaction, you should feel no guilt walking away at any time. And so if you
Mhm.
ever feel like pressure to stay, see one more option, think about one more thing, that's a pretty, big red flag for me. And, I'm probably going to try extra hard to walk away. Because again, a good dynamic, a good running store is going to try to help you, not just sell to you.
Yeah. Travis, this came up earlier when Brian was talking about something, and it reminded me of it again. One of the difficult things that running stores have is someone comes in, they get the gait analysis, they get the shoe fitting, and then the client decides not to buy that day, and then they go buy the shoe online. how did management at Ragged kind of instruct you all to handle when the client wanted to walk away after you've invested upwards of 30 minutes, maybe even 45 minutes up to an hour with a client trying on a whole bunch of shoes?
Yeah, that was always a very awkward situation, and I was never very comfortable in that situation. It definitely happened a fair amount as well.
Hmm.
People come in, you see them start taking pictures of the boxes, like what's the name of the shoe, what's the cost, things like that. And for us, we were encouraged to say, hey, like, if they say they're walking away, we say, well, we didn't spend a lot of time with you. Did you want us to, put any shoes on hold that you, we would still reach out and say, like, just really emphasize we did spend a lot of time with you.
Hmm.
I don't want to say it's a guilt trip, but it is something that hopefully they weren't doing this purposefully all along. Because we truly do try to care. And do we need to order a pair of shoes for them? Or, yeah, do we need to put shoes on hold for them and let them think about it? I mean, that's totally fine. But yeah, there were definitely a few times where they would just take a picture and they're going to go home and look something cheaper on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a tough thing. I would say running stores have gotten better at a lot of stores will price match,
Yeah.
and so like going into the store, Brian is telling you like, hey, at any point feel comfortable walking away, make sure you're getting the experience that you need. At least ask them if they're going to price match. Like if you're really insistent on saving the $10 or the 15 or $20, ask the store if they price match, right? Because you're also, if you have that relationship with the store, and we're going to get more into that relationship with the store in a moment, but they can really start to cater the experience to you in a very personal way. And so ask them if they price match, right? Or ask if they have, hey, do you have any old models? It's like, hey, do you have any of the last year's model? And a lot of places will have those on clearance or they'll be selling them at a discount. Um, and so, like, I would encourage you to try and work with the store because I think the store can provide a lot of benefits for you.
If price was a concern, we did like go to the back. There was a clearance section, and we would again leverage that knowledge that we had during the shoe fitting, and look for what are the sizes that are available, what are the ones that potentially might fit, and really do the best that we can with what we have as well. And well, if people did ask about price match, I definitely would have raised it with the manager and said, hey, they see it cheaper online here. We can get a guaranteed sale right now. Like,
Yeah.
what's the harm in that? And also, I mean, we did give quite a few discounts at Ragged Mountain as well. Like, if you're a UVA alumni, we gave you a 15% off discount. Same thing if you're a high school runner, or if you worked at UVA or were a teacher. Like, there was a lot of different discounts as well. So we would always ask about that too.
And I mean, almost all the stores, particularly for the high school athletes, you're probably going to have a 15% discount at any running store that you walk into. Um, you know, Running stores don't make their money off of individual sales. They make their money off of repeat return clients that trust them, that have had a good, healthy experience, and feel safe going there for their needs. And so, Brian has mentioned it a couple times, like making sure that you feel comfortable and safe in that environment, as well as the shoe that you're going to end up in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brian, you were also going to chime in with something for Travis's last comment.
I was going to say exactly what Travis said, that, if price is a major consideration, feel comfortable mentioning that. Realistically, you're probably not going to find a $35 pair of shoes, but I also wouldn't recommend a pair of shoes that cheap. But again, if price is a major concern, bring that up. And, in my experience, the staff will do everything they can to find something that will work with your budget while meeting your running needs.
Yeah. So we've talked a ton about the shoes and kind of the footwear. And, I think part of that is because that is like the primary essential that you need from the running store. Like that is the one piece of equipment that you need, and then something to cover yourself when you go out and run. Okay. But that's the absolute necessities. Brian, I'm going to go for maybe your top three other like must-haves or you need to consider getting from the running store?
Ooh, okay. So, a good, comfortable pair of running shorts. I think this does make a really big difference in terms of um, better quality will make your experience so much better. I personally really love my GPS watch. I don't think it's a necessity. I think you can definitely get by with just an old fashioned, records your time. But I personally love my GPS watch, and it unlocks a lot of data to sort of track progress over time. And I mean, and then I would say the sort of nutritional gear, nutrition and hydration, especially if you're a runner training for marathons. So I use a water bottle when I run. As a younger runner, I never did. It was sort of this pride thing. A real runner doesn't bring water with him. And my wife convinced me that was crazy, and I was just being a little bit too proud. And so now the rule is any run over 5 miles, I bring water with me. And honestly, it's been revolutionary. I feel so
Wow.
much better. And yeah, it's also just safer, especially on hot, humid days. So yeah, I would say a good pair of running shorts, running watch, and then hydration.
Hydration. Travis, what are some of your top recommendations?
Yeah, I will try to minimize overlap. But first of all, I do want to disagree with you, Jack. I think the high quality socks are so nice. If you ever put on that fresh pair of features for the first time, it is the most wonderful feeling ever, and you're going to want to spend all of your money on some very nice pairs of socks. I started off very slow, classically running in the classic Hanes pair of socks
Yeah.
that you get from Walmart, and then you try on your first pair of features and you're like, these are wonderful, and then those become your race day socks, and then slowly for Christmas you keep on adding to your stockpile, and then your parents are wondering why in the world you're asking for $18 socks, and you're excited for them as well. But that's something that is, I think, really important. That's a high one up on my list, at least.
Well, so okay, let me maybe rephrase. I completely agree with you if someone wants to put those in my stocking for Christmas, or if
Yes.
someone wants to slip those, into the birthday card. Um,
Master
I
has given Dobby a sock. Dobby
exactly
is
like
free.
like I completely agree that they are high quality socks. I just, for me, I don't feel compelled to go spend $20 to run in that pair of socks every day.
It's fair. It's fair. It's fair. It's a quality of life thing, maybe. Um, the,
Okay, so
the
Travis recommends the socks. What else would you recommend, Travis?
yeah, two other things. A wicking t-shirt. Like, just don't run in cotton shirts, please, especially on a hot and humid day. It, chafing happens. It's real. It hurts. And linking to other, like, linking to that as well, anti-chafe cream, like, Body Glide,
Mhm.
anything like that, especially on those hot and humid days, rainy days. You're doing a marathon. I mean, you're gonna want the anti-chafe. It's pretty important.
Yeah, there's some good ways to use that too. Like one to help with the chafing. There's some sensitive areas that will chafe. Those of you watching saw an awkward hand motion there. If that makes anyone else tune into, watching the podcast, I would say you can also kind of sometimes like slick this area right above your eyes with some of that anti-chafing to help kind of block like a sweat blocker. Uh,
Ooh,
those of you that know me know that doesn't really work for me. I overpower such things with my ability to regulate my body temperature. But, that's another way that you can use that. Gold Bond makes a similar product to the Body Glide that does the same thing. And so that's another recommendation there that's I think can be worth the investment. So we have some good product recommendations. I mean, I agree. The socks are great. Personally, I'm not going to go for them every time, but I'm never going to say no if someone wants to give them to me. I also love my running watch. I would say and add about the running watch, I would do some research about the different models. There are so many different lines of watches. Even if you just look at the Garmin brand, there's so many different models that have so many different strengths and features and so many of these things that sound cool. I would encourage you to like think about what you're actually going to need and use. And so, like for me, I have the most basic line because I don't I'm not going to utilize some of the features of the more expensive watches. And so I would encourage you to research on your own before you go get that watch. I do want to kind of set up some of our more experienced athletes where, now we've cultivated that relationship with the running store, and we want to capitalize on it because we need to kind of augment our gear. We need to augment, what we're using. And I think the first place that shows up is, when is it time to have multiple shoes? How should I go about picking that secondary shoe or that second shoe? And so first I'm going to go to Brian, because I know you're running a ton of miles. Are you rotating shoes? Do you have different models of shoes? How did you decide? When do you use which one? Paint us a picture.
Sure. So I do rotate my shoes. So I'll sort of back up just one step, and I would say that almost anyone, I think, can benefit from shoe rotation. I think if you're someone who's only running 2 or 3 times a week, it's probably not necessary. But I feel like once you get up to you're running 5, 6, 7 times a week, you can benefit from it. It'll help prevent injuries, and we can talk about the science of why that's the case, but it'll help the shoes last longer, and it'll also help prevent injuries. And so for me personally, I do rotate my shoes. I've got 2 different pairs of the same shoe, which I know is not quite ideal, that I sort of rotate through for some of the more easy runs. And then I've got another pair that I wear on workouts, and then another pair that I wear for races. So that's sort of a general rotation.
Yeah, walk us through your shoe lineup. What are you running in?
Sure. So Saucony Endorphin Speed, I think they're up to the 5 now, is my go-to pair of shoes. It feels absolutely amazing. It provides this nice balance of comfort and stability, and it technically is more geared toward like tempo runs, but honestly I wear it for all of my runs because it just feels so good. So I'll sort of have 2 of those going at any given time. For workouts, I'll often use like an old pair of Nike Vaporflies, or sometimes the Saucony Endorphin Pro, I think, the sort of super shoe version of the Saucony. And then for race day, a sort of fresh pair of Vaporflies. That's the typical rotation for me. So nothing too fancy, but I really like it.
Yeah. Travis, I know that you've been cycling a lot recently and you've had some things going on with your running, but I do remember, and something that I've actually drawn a lot of inspiration for on my recent training, is you were running a lot, particularly towards the end of college. And you were working at the store, so you had great access to a running store. What was your shoe rotation like then? What were you prioritizing? And then, go ahead and give us the lineup too.
Yeah, for me, I primarily had 2 shoes in my rotation. There was the Nike Pegasus and then the Hoka Clifton. The Hoka Clifton would usually be like my easy day recovery shoe. I'd run in that probably 2 or 3 times a week. And then the Nike Pegasus would be my do-it-all shoe if I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing, or if it was a tempo, a workout, or anything like that. That would be my main shoe. So pretty much just those 2 that I would have.
Gotcha. Yeah, rotating shoes increases the lifetime of the shoes. I like the analogy that the shoes are kind of like your muscles. They need time to recover as well. The foam needs time to decompress after the pounding into the pavement or the dirt or wherever it is. I rotate shoes, although I just keep the one model. And so I'm running in the Hoka Mach. Every time I go get shoes, I am trying on as many pairs of shoes as I can. Just for whatever reason, that's been what works recently. But I do like to always try on new shoes in case I find something else that I really like.
One thing I really liked the difference of was like with the Nike Pegasus and the Hoka was that difference in drop. I thought it kind of worked slightly different muscles between each pair of shoes as well. So for example, like I was talking about before with those lower drop shoes, like the Hoka, which I believe is like 5 millimeter drop, versus I think the Nike being maybe a 10 millimeter drop. It puts more strain and puts more effort on your calves and your Achilles versus the higher drop shoe putting more on your knees, your quads as well. So, it's very subtle, but I always thought that was probably beneficial just for leg strength and injury prevention as well.
Yeah, there's a study from I think 2015 that found that runners that rotated their shoes had I think were 39% less likely to get injured. And yeah, part of the reason, as Jack said, is it sort of gives the shoes a little bit of time to decompress, so that can help not only shoe longevity but your own sort of your legs longevity, but also because the vast majority of running injuries are overuse injuries. We're
Hmm.
pounding our legs like thousands of times every single run, and so that's putting a lot of pressure on the same muscles, the same tendons, the same ligaments. And so when we rotate our shoes, it's like we're working things ever so slightly differently. We might not even be able to notice it, but we're stressing systems in a slightly different way that helps to keep us just a little bit less injury prone.
Well, so let's talk about how, different shoes can stress your body in different ways. Travis, you've mentioned it a couple times about the heel to toe drop. And you said that the lower, right, so the closer to zero that heel to toe drop is, right, one of the really common numbers right now is 4 millimeters. That puts more strain on like the calf and the Achilles area. There's also a lot of people that like to push the idea that that kind of shoe is, quote, faster or, quote, better for you in terms of your natural running style. Travis, what are some of the kind of the truths and myths behind the lower heel to toe drop? What is, what should we know? What should we be wary of? And how should we actually inform our decision?
This is a really hot topic, a big debate, and I think a lot of this was sparked by the book Born to Run. I think once that book was launched, everyone wanted to start buying barefoot shoes, and I think that became a bit of a fad. Personally, I think I'm not against the barefoot shoes or even pushing more towards like ultras, which are zero drop shoes. I think it's really good for maybe your easy runs, your easy days, things like that. But it's something where it would not be my sole shoe. There's
Mhm.
there's probably a reason you don't see professional athletes running all of their workouts in their zero drop shoes. There's a reason that they likely have at least 4 millimeters or up.
Okay.
And I'm gonna guess that's because that's where they've seen the most, like the best results in general.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second time the Born to Run book has come up on the podcast. I think it's interesting to read. I'm not going to ever discourage someone from reading a running book. So if you're hearing this for the second time and you want to go read it and hear what it's about, go read it. I would just kind of think about and make an informed decision, based off of that. And something of note is one of those first like barefoot running shoe brands got sued into oblivion after about a year when everyone buying their shoes started getting hurt. And if you're going to make the switch from, for a while, 12 millimeters was the standard. Now 8 to 10 is a pretty common number, all the way down to 4 or 5. Do it gradually, right? So, I don't think many of us are going to be able to show you or pinpoint visually the difference between 4 millimeters and 8 to 10 millimeters. But when you take thousands and thousands and thousands of steps over the course of a run, that very small difference adds up. And so building up that resiliency slowly, I think, is super important. We had a teammate in college, Rachel, who she did the coaching position for the girls team. And one of the things that she brought was we're going to add a small amount of barefoot running. And so for a couple seasons, the girls were adding in some barefoot running. But what she did really well was it was in very small doses, very, very structured, and in like a very safe environment, trying to capitalize on some of those things. And so that was a nice middle ground that she found of, hey, here's how we've spent our lifetime in these shoes versus, hey, maybe we do want to get to some of these other things that they talk about in like the Born to Run book, but how do we do it safely so that we don't get hurt?
Yeah, makes sense. The rationale for the barefoot movement is, we evolved to run and we evolved without shoes, which, true enough, but we've also individually grown up always wearing shoes. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree that if you try going from wearing shoes to trying to run barefoot,
Hmm.
you're almost certainly going to get injured. And I don't really think there's any evidence that barefoot running reduces your risk of injury. And like I said, if anything, trying to make that switch abruptly can lead to more injuries.
Yeah, agreed. And again, comfort, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna try that lower heel to toe drop shoe, and you might feel that your calves are a little sore. Like, listen to the feedback from your body, right? This is kind of a constant refrain here, but as much as we might hate to admit it, like your body knows best. So, like, listen to what it's telling you, work with it so that you're not, overdoing things and getting hurt. Because at the end of the day, we want you to be able to run. We want you to continue running, continue training, and to enjoy it, not to be suffering through these long runs and long periods of training. What are our thoughts on super shoes, both for workouts, for getting them for races, the use of them, by just kind of the general runner versus the professional runner? Let's hear from Travis first.
I I became injured with running before the really nice super shoes really started coming out. And I wasn't really willing to drop $250 on a pair of shoes. I thought that was kind of ridiculous. I think I had like a pretty nice 100 and maybe $60 pair of Nike shoes that I bought on clearance that I used for my marathon.
Hmm.
But otherwise, I'm doing all my workouts in my Nike Pegasus. I'm doing my easy runs in my Hokas. But otherwise, yeah, the super shoes, maybe save them for race day. I wouldn't even do workouts in those.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a fan of them in the right context. So I don't think every runner needs one. Again, if you're a beginner runner who's just trying to build a routine of running 3 times a week, you probably don't need super shoes. Um, and I also think professional runners are wearing super shoes for all of their workouts, all of their races, and they're also getting the shoes for free. So that makes things much easier. If you're, on a real budget, like I said, I wear them in my marathons and I wear old pairs in my workouts. And I do think they are beneficial. I do run faster in them. But they're also, people sometimes think of them as if they are magic and you're going to drop, 10, 20 minutes from your time. My very first marathon, I was wearing a pair of those really cheap, clunky, heavy shoes that I mentioned.
From
And I
Coles.
ran from Coles, yes.
Yeah.
And I ran a 2:52. And my next marathon, I wore a pair of Vaporflies and very similar conditions, very similar courses, and I ran a 2:51. So I did PR, but it was by 1 minute. So, again, I still wear them for my races, but is it worth $250? That's a question that, everyone has to decide for themselves.
Yeah. I I'm in a similar boat. I have not sprung for a pair of super shoes myself. So keep in mind this is coming from someone that has not actually run or raced in a pair of super shoes. I just think that the percent return that we see advertised for these professional athletes, I think that number is really only verifiable and accurate for that caliber of athlete. I think for those of us that are not professional athletes, which is going to be probably everybody listening to this, um, we're not going to get the same thing. And, I'm not going to disagree that it makes a difference. Like, Brian, like, I 100% believe you when you say that you feel like you run faster in them. I just, I think that's a question you have to really ask yourself. Do I want to drop the $250 for a pair of shoes that the lifetime in terms of miles of those shoes is lower than the lifetime of a normal pair of trainers? And so that's another thing that some running stores will try and push on people. And is another one of those red flags. Watched it happen recently as well, where I'm looking at someone who, they are going to be ecstatic when they break 30 in the 5K. They're going to be over the moon happy. And I'm watching them be sold a pair of carbon shoes. Like that's not the time or the situation for them. And so they have their uses, they have the right time for them, but it is by no means an essential. And I don't think that you should let anybody tell you that the carbon shoe or the super shoe is an essential for kind of your training and your race day kit.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, so let's round this out with a little bit of like kind of personal, what is in your bag, what are essentials. Like we've had some top recommendations, but we'll do Brian first. What are you have to have them? They immediately need to be replaced when they're starting to go bad, or like it's just not going to work without it. And, the things that you're going to be getting from the running store.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I don't really have a ton of gear. A pair of shoes, running shorts, and give me hydration. And on my long runs, a pair of Cliff Blocks or a pack of goo for sort of nutrition to keep me going. But beyond that, I personally, don't worry too much about all the fancy gear and gadgets and things.
Okay. Is there a fancy gear or gadget that you maybe have your eye on that if someone wanted to surprise you with a nice gift that they could get you?
That's, that's a really good question. I honestly not. I ran in those cheap clunky shoes for 10 years and I don't recommend that. But that just kind of I think illustrates that I do still wear the cheap, Hanes socks from Walmart and those work just fine. So, yeah.
Yeah. Travis, what about you? What are your essentials, must-haves, even if they're not, necessarily something you'd recommend for a beginner runner?
Well, I think one of the great things about running is just how accessible it is, and you really don't need very much.
Hmm.
Um, just get one pair of really nice shoes, and I think that's how I started off. I mean, I grew up and I got two pairs of shoes a year pretty much, and it was before the fall season and before the spring season, and those are the shoes that I ran in, and that did really great for me in high school. And then I finally bought a pair of spikes. So if you're getting into cross country or track, spikes are worth it. Eventually, that's something that you should definitely invest in as well. But really, a good pair of trainers, good pair of spikes, put some socks on your list for Christmas, and then you're pretty much set. You're good to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, sometimes we overcomplicate things. And again, I think the further you go in the sport, I think it's appropriate to specialize and get spikes. And, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to need different shoes for, a mile than for a marathon. So I think specialization is totally appropriate the further you get into it. But especially as a newer runner, don't let that be a barrier to entry. So all you really need is a good, decent quality pair of shoes, which your running store can help you pick out, and then you can get started running.
I am running shoes. I'm particular about my shorts. So, like, that's something that people will want to buy me shorts for gifts, and I say no because I want to pick them out myself. Because you're spending a long time and a lot of miles in those shorts, so like you want those to be the right fit. Kind of similar to what Travis was saying about the socks and things like that. I need the hat. Like I have, I think I have four hats that I kind of rotate through, and I'm not going to go spend a bunch of money on a hat. Most of those have been gifts or like souvenir items. So, my two favorite hats right now, one was a gift from a student slash athlete when I was leaving the state of Washington. And then the other is a hat that I got when we took our team to Oregon Relays in Eugene. And I'm like, hey, we're at a cool environment, a cool place. I'm going to get a souvenir. Those are my two favorites. And, I think that this kind of encapsulates the idea of this episode that I would say the only essential that you need to leave the running store with is a good pair of shoes. Like that's the only essential. And then there is the list of things that, hey, these are nice to have, right? And if I'm comfortable, if I have the means to do it, yes, I'm going to go get these things. And that's stuff like, hey, maybe I do want the nice pair of socks. Maybe I do want the GPS watch. Or, yeah, I'm having, like on some of my longer runs, some chafing and I'm going to get the body glide, or I need my nutrition, right? And those are things that are nice to have, but they're not essentials, right? And so, like, don't let those be pushed on you, right? Don't even let a pair of shoes be pushed on you, even though that is like a necessary item to leave the running store with. And so I would encourage you, whether you are a beginner runner, intermediate, or high school runner, collegiate runner, adult runner, professional runner. It's like know what you need to leave the store with and feel free to say no to the other stuff. And, inform yourself, take the time to step back and evaluate if it's something that you need. And then just like enjoy having an expert help you, which is, the really valuable thing from the running store.
I think maybe one thing to mention is like, like when you come in, just have a very open mind. Let them know that this is your first time to a running store. They're going to guide you through the whole process. And they really are experts. I wasn't allowed to do my first shoe fitting on my own for a whole year after working at the running store. It really took a long time for us to build up our own ability, have the knowledge when it comes to the shoes. And we really do have a lot of experience, and I think really trust them. But then also, of course, be wary of the potential upsells and things like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a good point. Yeah, being open-minded. I don't care so much about the color. Find the shoe first, then figure out the color.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also have one more piece of advice. If you're thinking about, again, the cost of a running shoe and wondering if it's worth it, I can assure you from experience that it is. Something that finally convinced me to go to Ragged Mountain to invest in a real pair of running shoes is I thought about all the times that I was injured and how frustrating it was to not be able to run when you just desperately wanted to go outside and go for a run. I would think to myself, what I would give and what I would pay in that moment to magically be healed and be able to run, I would have paid so much money. And so I finally realized if I'm willing to pay $150 or more to get healthy, I should be willing to pay that much to stay healthy by wearing a proper pair of running shoes. And that's finally what it took to sort of get me in the door and going to a real running store.
Yeah, I have a friend right now that, he had some pretty bad plantar fasciitis. And, so he's coming back really slowly from that. And he went and got a new pair of shoes. And we met a couple weeks ago for a run. And he's like, man, this like, I just don't like how this is like tugging at the inside of my arch. I'm like, dude, take them back. Like, go get the right pair of shoes. Like, think about all this time that you just took off. Like, what would you have given for months and months and months? And he was going on like 8 to 10 months of plantar fasciitis. It's like, what would you have given during that time to be able to go run? And so the running store is a worthwhile investment. Just make sure that you are kind of prepared and armed with the knowledge of, hey, my essential is running shoes. I maybe want a couple other items. But otherwise, like, it's a beneficial experience. It's going to help you. It is worth the investment in your time. And hopefully one of those things that leads to good quality training, enjoyment of the sport. And so if you need gear, if you need anything, get out to your running store. But until then, happy running.